Good afternoon. Welcome back to another of the weekly Q&A session. So this is the last one before Christmas. I hope everyone is all prepared and looking forward to it. So this is, as always, your opportunity to ask me any questions that you might have about getting started with strength training. So a lot of people might be thinking of getting started in January and not 100% sure actually what their plan is going to be when they step into the gym or whether they start this from home. So if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask away. In order to do that, this is being streamed out to both YouTube and to Facebook. So if you are watching this on YouTube live, there's going to be a chat feature on the right hand side. Just type any questions into there and they'll be flagged up to me and I'll respond to those as best I can. If you're watching this after the fact and you are watching the replay, then there's a comments below and then you can use the comments in the same way, ask your questions and I will then respond to those in future weeks. Whether you're live or on the replay, if you could do me a quick favour and just click the thumbs up button to like this video, make sure you're subscribed. And also, if you are subscribed, just click the bell icon and just select all, and that will make sure you're notified every time I do go live. So if you do want to be live on the chat in the future, you'll be able to do that. If you're watching this on Facebook, same thing, just use the comments underneath and they'll be flagged up to me with your question, and I will bring those up on screen and try and answer them as we go through. Same on Facebook, if you give this video a quick thumbs up, give it a like and make sure you follow either Never Taught to Lift or Chris Tiley Physiotherapy on Facebook, and you'll be notified when I go live in the future. Before I start with the first question that I've prepared, I just wanted to give you a couple of dates to put in the diary. So let's bring this up. So on the 9th of January, so that's a Tuesday evening at 7, or on Wednesday lunchtime, so 1 o'clock, so that's Wednesday the 10th. I'm going to be doing a free online presentation. It's going to take about an hour of your time, and it's going to start to go through all the theory that you're going to need in order to create your strength training plan, and it's going to give you something you can walk away with, some actionable steps to get started with strength training. So again, if your January plan is to start getting stronger and start to take some action, then all I ask is that an hour of your time. So they're the same content on both days. So you don't have to sign up for both. I've just done an evening one and a lunchtime one, so there's a couple of options there. So to sign up to those, you can go to nevertooldtolift.com/webinar, and you'll see the registration links there for both the Tuesday and the Wednesday one, or both on Facebook and YouTube. If you look in the description of this video, you'll see the individual links there, and all it'll ask for is your name and your email address, and you'll be sent your own individual link that you'll need at the time, and you'll also get a reminder 15 minutes before. If you're not 100% sure if you can make it, it's still worth registering because I will be sending out replays afterwards. So if you're registered, you're more likely to receive the replay afterwards. So if you sign up there. Good. So there's a question that I am always asked in some form of another, and I just wanted to go through that in a bit more detail now. So someone asked me this week, how do I know if my lifting form is okay? Or often it's a variation of, how do I lift correctly? And I just wanted to go over that in a bit more detail because it's something that a lot of people worry about, and it's something that stops people getting started. And it might be, my take on this is going to be slightly different from others, as I'm coming in from this as a physiotherapist mindset, whereas other people are looking at it from more of a performance mindset. But generally, when we talk about lifting form or lifting technique, we are looking at it from a point of view of how can I move as much weight as possible in the most efficient way. And that's where these kind of optimal or perfect forms come into place. So if we're talking about a deadlift, people talk about keeping a nice straight back and not letting the back round. And same with squatting. There's various ways we look at a squat that if you keep the optimal form, you're more likely to lift more than if you weren't in an optimal form or an optimal posture. the confusion that comes into play is that a lot of people assume that if you're not lifting with the perfect form, then you're more likely to pick up an injury. And because they're fearful of an injury whilst lifting heavy weights, they then don't get started. And rather than building strength, they actually become weaker and decondition, and suddenly the things in everyday life become more, they're potentially going to be more problematic than if they were stronger and more robust and resilient. So when it comes to lifting form, as long as whatever form that we start with, we gradually progress and we build slowly, then you're less likely to pick up any injury regardless of the form that you're using. And I've got some pictures in a second because I'm a more visual person, and hopefully you'll find that they'll describe this in a bit more, a bit easier way to understand. But a lot of people, if you're starting lifting weights and you're in your 60s and beyond, you may well have some restrictions in your joints or some conditions that don't allow you to go through a full mobility of all your joints, which means you're unlikely to be able to lift in every movement with perfect technique. And what tends to happen is people then say, well, if I can't do that with perfect technique, I'm going to leave that exercise out because I'm scared that it's going to cause an injury, and I'm just going to work on the other exercises that I can do. But the problem with that is you're then going to have a group of muscles in a particular movement that are declining and deconditioning. And as I said, that's potentially going to be more problematic. So what we just need to do is work with the technique that you do have, and then gradually try and build that slowly. Try and add a little bit of weight over time. Try and reduce repetitions. The muscles come down to fatigue at an earlier stage, maybe sort of 5 rather than at the 15 repetitions. And as you get stronger, what you'll probably find is your lifting technique will actually improve as you get stronger, and you'll probably find that your mobility improves, because often a lack of mobility is sometimes down to muscles guarding the area because they don't trust the muscle strength around it. Whereas as the muscle strength improves, the other muscles relax and allow more movement, which then allows you to lift with a slightly better technique. Whereas if you didn't get started in the first place, it's probably just going to get stiffer and become weaker. But I talked about those images. So this is from another physiotherapist called Adam Meakins, or referred to as a sports physiotherapist, that he's well worth following on social media. He's given me permission to use these images in previous blog posts and talks that I've done, and he does a lot of great infographics. Sometimes he can use strong language, so if you can get offended by that, then it might be worth not looking at some of his stuff. But if you can see past that, then a lot of the stuff he talks about, it makes a lot of sense, and the infographics makes it really easy to understand. But with this one in particular, so this blue circle around all those tasks there represents your body's ability to tolerate the demands of those tasks, so the stresses and the force that they place through the muscles, the tendons, the joints, the bones, etc. So the blue circle is bigger than all the words and those tasks inside it. So whilst those tasks stay within what we can tolerate, we don't experience any pain or discomfort. However, if we start to suddenly increase how much you do, so whether you suddenly start walking more, whether you go on a holiday that involves going up lots of stairs, and when you're sightseeing and up towers and down them again, you might find that you suddenly increase the demands through the knee, and the knee starts to become painful. Again, if you're in the summer holidays and you're suddenly having to look after the grandkids more than you would do during term time, that sudden increase can start to cause a bit of a problem there. So that red writing outside the circle shows that we are doing more than our body is currently able to tolerate, and that can manifest in pain or symptoms. The opposite is true. So if you suddenly do less than you usually do, so you have long periods of inactivity, you find that although you're not increasing those tasks, your body's lost the ability to tolerate them. So when you do start to add an activity back into your life again, they're now more than your body can tolerate, so that can then cause a problem. So what we're trying to do, it talks about rehab or exercise here, but if we're looking at strength training, your aim is to push your body out of its comfort zone slightly, and we're gradually going to build on that and progress and add a bit of weight, and next time then add a little bit more, and you're giving your body time to adapt each time, and then building on what you've built on. You'll find that you create this extra space around those tasks. You've created this wiggle room, that robustness and that reserve, and you'll find that you can now do those. Not only can you do those activities, but you can suddenly increase, and because you've pushed your body in other ways, it can tolerate the sudden changes that you've worked on. Whereas if you're always on the threshold, then all it takes is, let's say, a walking holiday here to suddenly flare up that knee pain, or the summer holidays with the grandkids to flare up your back. And that's what we're trying to work on with lifting weights, particularly with those postures that might not be considered perfect, is if you start slowly, gradually build, you're creating this robustness and this reserve within your back, your knees, etc., so that you'll be able to then deal with the demands of everyday life, but you can then start to maybe adapt the positions and the techniques you work on. So yeah, I found those images really helped me, and I use them all the time with my patients to explain that. What I would also say though, but sometimes lifting form not being correct is purely down to either confusion or just not understanding things in the right way, and sometimes just having someone look over you. So if you're doing it in a gym, is just going to someone at the desk and saying, do you mind having a quick look at how I do this deadlift or how I do this squat? And sometimes if they can just give you a couple of pointers on cues, then you find that you suddenly it makes sense, and you're doing it with a lot better technique in terms of being able to then be able to lift more or do more or target the muscles you're aiming for. So don't ignore technique completely, but if you can't get that perfect technique that everyone seems to be aspiring for, work with what you've got and then gradually build, and know that you might need to take things slightly slower in terms of progression, and go from there. So yeah, I hope that kind of all made sense then from there, but any follow-on questions from that, then do write those in the comments. Once again, if you are watching this live now, do use that chat feature if you're on YouTube, or use a comments feature on the Facebook to type any questions in. They'll flag up to me and I can answer those right now. Or if you're watching the replay, then do use the comments and I will check on them to bring it up in a future week's episode. Before I go on again, just to remind you, for anyone who's just joined on since, that I do have these online presentations or webinars that I'm going to be doing on Tuesday the 9th in the evening and Wednesday the 10th in lunchtime, and you can sign up to those. It's nevertoldtolift.com/webinar. If you are looking for a bit of advice to how to get started, then you might be interested in the Never Told to Lift ebook. This is completely free of charge. You just need to go to nevertoldtolift.com/start-here, or again, if you look in the video description, you'll find a link to that. That will give you a good grounding on how you can create your own 12-week strength training program, and some of the exercise adaptations you might want to consider if you can't do a squat. Then there might be a way around doing a different variation of a squat to get started with, and it talks through some of those adaptations that you might want to use depending on the condition or ability level you currently have. And if you find that you actually want a slightly more interactive way of going through that, then you might be interested in the Stronger for Life online course. So this is a video-based course. It's a bit more interactive, easier to follow, and you'll then get weekly Q&A sessions, weekly group Zoom calls with myself, so you can ask me any sticking points you might be going through, or we often use it as accountability. So the guys going through the course at the moment love coming into the calls just to update everyone with their progress as they're going through it. So again, if that's of interest, it's nevertoldtolift.com/course. But for now, I've got another question that came through on Facebook in between the weeks. So this one was, what exercises do you recommend for canal stenosis? So what they referring to as canal stenosis is a narrowing of the spinal canal. So it's often in the neck or in the lower back. They've not elaborated which they're suffering, but most people, when it comes to lifting weights, are more concerned about their lower back. So I'll kind of refer to it as if it is the lower back there. And what that narrowing can be, some people are born with a slightly narrower canal. Some people have bony spurs that start to grow, which then impede the space there. Some people, it's a disc bulge type issue that is narrowing the space there. But that can often lead to some kind of sensitivity and irritation that can cause either pain, pins and needles, numbness often down the legs or in the back itself. What people with stenosis tend to not like quite so much is going into extension. That's a bit of an aggravating position for them. Other people, we don't often suggest doing a rounded, end of range, kind of rounded back with heavy load. So with those two things in mind, there might be a few adaptations we make, but generally the exercises, I still try and get people started with the same exercises that I would normally give to people, and that is some variation of each of the 7 movement patterns. So the 7 movement patterns I tend to work through are some variation of a squat, so that action of sitting down and standing up, a hip hinge, so it's kind of bending at the waist as if you're going to pick something up and then lifting it back up again, so it's commonly a deadlift. Some form of lunge where one foot is in front of the other and you're kind of bending the back knee down to the floor. A push exercise where you're pushing something away from you or pushing your body away from the floor in terms of a push-up. Pull-up is you're pulling something, or pull exercise, you're pulling something towards you, or you might be pulling yourself up to the height of a bar and back down again. And then you've got rotation of the body and you've got carrying something, whether that's one arm or 2. So with some of these exercises, we may need to adapt it around the back and that stenosis and what your back can currently tolerate. And it often, for the extension ones, it's the push exercise. So if someone's, say, doing a shoulder press and they're pressing up, as the arms start to fatigue, people start to arch the back to try and get themselves in a slightly different position to be able to finish that movement off. And now if that's the case, you tend to find that the back doesn't quite like that if you've got stenosis. So a better position for you might be to actually do that sitting down. So you're already starting in a more comfortable position for most people with stenosis, which is slightly bent position at the back or slightly rounded. And then it's easier to kind of drive through the legs and sit as you're then pushing up, and you tend not to go into extension as you're doing that. Another option is, rather than sitting up or standing, you might actually lay in your back and do some form of chest press where you're pushing the arms kind of forwards there, and you tend not to get so much back extension as you're doing that. For rotation, again, rather than standing, you might, if you're using a resistance band that's anchored over this way and you're pulling round and back again, rather than doing that in standing where you might arch your back as you start to compensate as you get tired, sitting down tends to avoid that happening. For squats and deadlifts, it might be that we just work initially on a lower depth, so a shallower depth motion. So rather than squatting down to the floor, you're just squatting down to a chair or something even slightly higher than that and just loading that part of the movement heavier. And the same with the deadlift, is rather than lifting a bar from the floor, you either lift it off a raised surface, so we often call them rack pulls, or you might even start with a Romanian deadlift, and you're going to start just with a bar or kettlebell or dumbbells up at kind of waist height, bend at the hips until it's about level with the knee and come back up again. So it's easier to maintain that slightly straighter position rather than going down into and risking the end of range flexion, which might flare things up a little bit for you. So again, it seems a bit counterintuitive having just spoken about lifting technique and not being too hung up on that. And for anyone who hasn't got an injury or can tolerate most movements, then yeah, lifting technique, don't get too worried if you're there. But if you know that you've got a condition like stenosis that's going to cause a reaction, then we need to be a little bit more careful about it, because we don't want to cause a reaction which means that it keeps you out of the gym or keeps you away from workouts at home for longer periods of time. So that's where you adapt with either shallower depth motions as you're going through it, or seated positions, or even for that deadlift is a form of hip hinge. So the other kind of hip hinge we can do is a bridge. So you might lay on your back with your knees bent to 90 degrees, and then you've got to lift your hips up into the air and back down, and you're going from a bent hip position to your hips being extended, and that is the same kind of action as you are doing when you're doing a deadlift, but it's a lot less load on the body. But equally, we need to get enough load going through the body, all those muscles, to push the muscles to fatigue in order for them to get stronger. So it's finding an easier way of doing it, but ensuring that it's still hard enough that it's going to cause some kind of reaction to build that strength. There are a few other exercises that aren't included within those kind of 7 functional movement patterns that you might want to do. So you can do more Pilates-based style exercises where you're trying to work the deeper abdominal muscles. So there's an exercise called dead bugs, where you kind of lay on your back with your hands and legs in the air, and you're trying to lower the leg away from you one way, whether your opposite arm is going the other way, but you're trying to keep your stomach muscles tight as you do that and stop the back from arching, and that is quite a challenging exercise. But I think that's probably enough on that for the moment. But again, any follow-on questions from that, from the person on Facebook that left this message, or from anyone else who might be suffering from spinal canal stenosis or anything similar, then again, use the chat feature or the comments to write any questions there. If you've got a completely separate question, please do leave that with me now, and I can try and answer that whilst we're live. And then I've got one more question that I have prepared that I wanted to go through, was how do you adapt strength training for conditions such as unexplained or chronic fatigue? So with chronic fatigue or unexplained fatigue, it tends to be that you suffer with energy levels, and what could be good for you on one day completely changes the next day, and you can't do half of what you did, and the next day then everything suddenly feels a lot easier. So it's a lot harder to plan your gym sessions around that. But a lot of the adaptations will come around how you compile your workouts and what you plan to do on each session, rather than changing the exercises so much. So with the easiest way of explaining it is, rather than doing, say, I don't know, a 45-minute workout, or for maths, say 40-minute workout, you might need to start doing 20-minute workouts more frequently, and that can sometimes be a way of getting around that fatigue. And if on a good day you feel like you could do more, then you can always tag on and do a little bit extra with that. But on a day where you're not feeling so good, if you only do 20 minutes, that's still what you set out to do, rather than feeling like you failed because you hadn't hit the 40-minute mark. If we kind of go into that a bit more with the exercises, so when you are pushing muscles to fatigue, which you need to do to try and build strength in them, in between sets, it's really important that we get enough rest in between. So generally, depending on how many repetitions it is to push to fatigue, you want to have at least 2 to 3 minutes of rest for that muscle group that you've worked at, before you then start your second set, and then again 2 to 3 minutes rest before you start your third set. Now, within kind of the ebook that you can get, or the online course, I tend to suggest to people that they pair exercises together, because if you're just doing one exercise and then you have 2 minutes rest and then you're doing 3 sets, that's 6 minutes of rest that you're doing nothing in. And if you're then doing 4 exercises, that can then build up to about 24 minutes of a workout where you're not doing anything, and then you add in the exercise time on top of that. And some people find that they get bored in that 2 minutes and they only actually do about 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and they go straight back into the second set. And if you've got the ability to do that, you probably didn't push your muscles hard enough in the first place, so you could be a lot more efficient with building strength. But a lot of people don't want to sit in a gym not doing anything. So what I tend to suggest is you pair it. So you might do a lower body exercise, and then once you finish your lower body exercise, in that 2 minute gap, you're then moving on and doing an upper body exercise. And then once you finish that, you can go back to the lower body exercise again. And then when you finish, you're going back to it. So you then not, rather than whilst the legs are having their 2 minutes rest, you're filling that time with another exercise. So for most people, that becomes a really efficient way of using time. But if you're someone who struggles with chronic fatigue, you probably will need that 2 minutes to ensure that you're not pushing your general energy levels too much. Because if you find that that's limiting you, which means then the next set you can't put enough effort in to push your muscles to fatigue because your energy levels are too low, and then it's building and building, and you find that you actually can't finish your workout, and then everything's going to feel like it was a demoralizing experience. Then you're less likely to come back next time, and then it just becomes a kind of negative cycle. So you might want to take that first approach that I did, is you might actually find that you're in the gym for the same length of time, but the amount of training you do is less because you need that time in between the sets, and there's no pressure to fill that time with something else. As you do your exercise, take the rest, do the exercise, take the rest. So that generally is the best way. And it might be that, again, most people I suggest as you're getting started, you might within one workout do 4 different movement patterns or exercises, and you do 3 sets of each. It might be, if you struggle with fatigue, that you're only doing 2 exercises with those rest periods in between, and then on another day you come back and you do the other 2 exercises and come back, and it might be you're doing more workouts but each one is a lot shorter. So little and often is going to be a lot better for you. But what we want to do, if we want strength to be an outcome, we have to manage the fatigue best we can so that we can still push the muscles to fatigue to get the muscle strength and not be limited by the general fatigue. And that goes the same with pain as well. Some people, the pain limits them in various joints before their muscle strength. They are able to push the muscle to fatigue, and that's where, rather than adapt how we structure a workout, that's where we adapt the exercises to make sure that we're not pushing into painful ranges of motion, but we still get some muscle strengthening and fatigue to work on from there. So yes, again, hope that helps. Let's just hide this one for now. So I've just had another question come up. So just bring this on the screen. So hi Shona, thanks for watching. So Shona's asked, do you have any tips for minimising DOMs in older adults when they first get started? Apologies if you've already answered this in previous live. Not really covered that so much, no. So yeah, DOMs, particularly as you're getting started, can be quite a negative experience, and particularly if you weren't expecting it in the first place. For anyone who doesn't know, DOMs refers to as delayed onset muscle soreness. So often people, if you start to work muscles to fatigue and you've never done that before, you find that you feel fine the rest of that day, but often it's the next morning, or sometimes it's even the morning after that, you wake up and those muscles really ache, and then they ache for what could be another 2 days, 3, 4, 5 days in some cases. And DOMs tends to kick in, and it's not anything to worry about. That soreness is normal, and some people almost feel like they failed a workout if they haven't got some level of DOMs afterwards. But for most people, it's limiting, because then even getting on and off the toilet becomes a challenge, and getting up and down from a low sofa and things like that if it is the legs. But yeah, generally, if you haven't done any training before, the DOMs is something you'll experience after that first session. And so what I try and do is minimise that, because if people weren't expecting, or it's taken them by surprise quite how intense the DOMs are. They're worried it's going to happen every single time, and then they don't want to go through that, so they just give up with the whole thing of weight training. So what I do, and often the people I tend to see, or if you are starting as an older adult, you may well have some other condition as well that potentially you're worried about flaring up, so whether that is knee pain or back pain. So if you're just getting started, I will very much start slowly. So I get people to get confident with their with the movement patterns first and with their exercises, and once they're confident with those, we're not even explored pushing the muscles to fatigue yet. Once they're confident with the technique and the movement patterns, then we start to add a bit of resistance in. But again, we may not be pushing to fatigue quite yet. We're just getting confident lifting with weight and some resistance. And then once you're confident doing that, then we start, right, let's try and reach muscle fatigue at around 15 repetitions. And then once you've reached muscle fatigue at 15 repetitions, then it's about gradually increasing the weight and trying to bring the fatigue point down to kind of closer to 5 repetitions. And from that 15 repetitions down to 5 repetitions, that's going to be down probably a minimum of a 3-month kind of window of time. But because we've gradually built up, and we've gone body weight first and a little bit of resistance and a little bit more until eventually reaching muscle fatigue, you tend to find any DOMs you get when you start pushing to muscle fatigue is a lot less intense than if you jump straight back in right, I haven't worked out, let's try and find a muscle fatigue routine straight away. That's where you get a lot more intense DOMs. So in terms of minimising the DOMs actually coming on in the first place, then it's a gradual build up over time to get to the case of pushing muscles to fatigue. In terms of managing them once you've got them, there are different strategies out there. Generally, getting the muscles moving again tends to be good, but it might be that if your next workout you're still suffering from DOMs, it might be that you just halve the weights again and you just go back through the motions of working with a little bit of resistance. But often you find that actually doing something minimises them, rather than if you do nothing, waiting for them to go, they tend to last a little bit longer. Some people will try and do various stretches. Some people will use things like massage guns, things like that, which all can help desensitize and calm things down. But a lot of it is rather than kind of manage it once you've got it, I try to focus on how can we reduce the risk of them starting in the first place. And I say risk because it's not necessarily a risk, it's just it can feel like a backward step when you've just taken your first positive forward step, and that it tends to be psychological, kind of a knock to your confidence. So yeah, I hope that answers some of those questions there, or that in the way that you wanted it. Good. So I'll just recap some of the other options of things you might want to go over. In the meantime, if there are any more questions before we finish, then please do use the chat feature on Facebook, on YouTube, or the comments on Facebook. So those last things that you might be interested in again. So if you are interested in getting started in January and you've not really done much yet, then do save the date and register your spot for the free online presentation. So it's January the 9th at 7 o'clock or Wednesday the 10th at 1 o'clock. So it's the same content both days, just I've given 2 different times for it. And it's going to be about an hour of your time, and it's going to just give you all the theory that you need to know to try and get started with strength training. And then there's going to be some actionable steps that you can take to go from there. I'll introduce you to both the free ebook that you can download. All you need to give is your name and email, and that will be sent out to you, and that is going to guide you through creating your own 12-week strength training program. If you're someone who likes more of a physical copy, then they are available on Amazon as well. So if you just search Never Told to Lift on Amazon, you should find that there. But if you want the free ebook, it's nevertoldtolift.com/start here, or start-here. And then again, if you're someone who would like more, a slightly more interactive way of going through all of that and have access to me on a weekly basis via some group Zoom calls, then you might be interested in the Never Told to Lift the Stronger for Life online course, which you can get via nevertoldtolift.com/course. And again, that's going to guide you through getting started with your own program that you've created for yourself around your current ability levels or any conditions you might have. And let's say you get the access to me on a weekly basis to kind of go over any sticking points or just to share your progress and use that as accountability to working through the next week to let us know the progress in the next call, which is what a lot of people are using the calls for now in that course. But for now, that is everything. So again, if you are watching the replay of this and you've made it to the end, so thank you for watching all the way through. If you've got any questions that you want me to go through on a later or a one, because I will be doing one next week, even between Christmas and New Year's. It's going to be 12 o'clock on Wednesday, and then it's going to continue to be 12 o'clock on Wednesdays going forwards. And if you want me to go through any questions, then please use a comment. If you're someone who doesn't want to do it in a public place on Facebook or YouTube, but you still want to ask a question, you can also send me an email. It's chris@nevertooldtolift.com. So that's chris@nevertooldtolift.com. And you can ask me there, and I'll ask that question, and I'll do that. I'll bring the question up anonymously, so you don't have to put your name to any questions. But for now, I hope you all have a great Christmas, and I'll look forward to meeting you in the next Q&A session on Wednesday, the 27th, I think it is, so next week at 12 o'clock. Okay, thank you.